So I'm going to be talking about a project called Common Ground, which is a Scotland-wide project using creativity to explore issues around land use and ownership. Why are we doing this project? This quote is a good place to start. You'll see James Hunter, the professor, has said Scotland has the most concentrated, most inequitable, most unreformed and most undemocratic land ownership system in the developed world. So it feels rather prescient to be talking about this issue. One of the things we've been asking participants is, how much of Scotland do you think is privately owned, so not owned by councils or Forestry Commission or Heritage? The lowest guess we've had so far from any participant is that 18% of Scotland is privately owned. The actual figure is much higher than that. It's actually 83%. No one's guessed that high yet. Most people put it under 50%, but in fact it is 83% of Scotland is in private hands, and those people that own it can, to a certain extent, do what they like with it. So why is the figure of private ownership so high in Scotland, but also in the UK? In short, because the system is organised in favour of the current landowning elite. They make their own rules, essentially. So, for example, the Queen, when she hands on Balmoral to the future King Charles in her will, there'll be no inheritance tax paid on that, because sovereign-to-sovereign transactions are exempt. This shows a little diagram. The Qatari royal family, who were also in that previous picture, have been buying a lot of land in Scotland recently and using incredibly opaque systems of kind of buying to maximise tax relief. This essentially shows how one company bought it who are owned by another company who in turn are owned by the original company. So as I say, complicated, convoluted systems that are rigged in favour of those with power and status and expensive lawyers. So land ownership gets quite confusing and depressing quite quickly, and it can be tempting to withdraw from it. But the architect Christopher Alexander, who wrote this book, reminds us that a person is so far formed by her surroundings that her state of harmony depends entirely on her harmony with her surroundings. So these systems of ownership come to define us. So we want to think of new models beyond ownership and profit. The book Happy City asks what happens if we designed environments not to foster economic growth, but to foster happiness. In Bogota, they've had a number of kind of revolutionary measures, one of which was putting mime artists and clowns on the street to take the part of traffic wardens to help people cross the road, to try and put a human face on the rules, I suppose, of the city. They also have a car-free day every single year, so citizens can feel safe to walk and cycle on the streets. We visited a project in Blackpool, run by an organisation called Camarados, and this cafe is entirely run and managed by homeless volunteers. And Camarados' mission statement is no less than to end social isolation through providing friends and purpose, through interaction and community. So what are we doing on Common Ground? We're in the midst of our project, and we've been all over the place, including to Sight Hill, and inviting people to rename their streets. Most of the streets in the area are currently named either Fountainwell something or Pinxton something, after what was the Fountainwell estate and the Laird, Dr. Pinxton. So that sense of inherited privilege and power is something always around them, and we wanted to encourage the residents to rename the streets to something that was meaningful to them and their lives. You can see here Football Street. And we're now investigating how to formally request a street name change from Glasgow City Council. Another thing we've done in Sight Hill is encourage the residents to write letters to someone in their neighbourhood that they've never met. What would they say about the streets where they live? What do they long for? How should these streets be used? What do they want to see? What do they want to change? And it's worth noting that Sight Hill is an area that's undergoing a huge £250 million regeneration at the moment. Talking of lots of money, this is Aberdeen, which is widely reported as one of the most unequal cities in the country in terms of wealth distribution. One participant we worked with said that when the oil money arrived, the change was like a fairy tale if you were lucky enough to be in on it. We were in residence at this building, Wernham House, a hostel for homeless people who have issues with alcohol misuse. Part of this project is about discussing land use and reform with those who are furthest away from the debate, but in some ways the most affected, those who feel they have no voice. We used a series of techniques, sensory workshops, blind tasting, singing, touching objects, to invite the residents to explore their ideas of city, community, and place. What did Aberdeen lose when it became a centre of oil wealth? What has changed about the city? What can we learn from the future, for the future from the past? Now, Wenham House is a space that offers a person-centred approach to each of its residents. There's no judgment, expectation, or preferred path. Each resident manages their own life and recovery. This was evident in the fact that the words the residents kept using to describe Wenham House were safe, home, and hope. The residents we met had such warmth and wisdom about how a city should be used, how the inhabitants should feel, and our next step is to work to share their insights on a broader stage and to celebrate with them the value of their voices. We're working with a group here in Glasgow, the Govan and Creighton Integration Network, and we have a small group of asylum seekers and refugees. And we meet with them once a week to discuss how they fit in to this intricate system of land and housing, which we're all enmeshed in. But again, some of those suffer at the most difficult ends of that system. We're talking to them about their experiences, good and bad, times where they did feel supported or ennobled or empowered by the system, but perhaps more importantly, times they felt lessened, powerless, and as one group member said, made to be half a human. So this project is one of exploration, conversation, and imagination. I have given you the tiniest pinpoint windows onto what we're doing, so please come and chat to me at some point in the break, or I'll be here all day. But we want to ask questions. What does the future look like for land and property ownership in Scotland? Who knows? But for now, our job is to come together, imagine new systems which are simpler, kinder, and provide dignity, safety, and happiness to everyone. Thank you.